On June 7th, 1992, three women, Suzie Streeter, her mother Sherill Levitt, and friend Stacy McCall, vanished from a quiet home on East Delmar Street in Springfield, Missouri. But inside Sherill Levitt's home on Delmar Street, things were anything but ordinary. It was late, close to 2 a.m., and her daughter Suzie Streeter and her best friend Stacy McCall were sitting on the couch, still buzzing from the excitement of graduation night. Suzie had just finished high school, and this was the night they were supposed to celebrate the freedom ahead of them. The night was filled with laughter, music, and stories of their future plans. They were ready to face the world, or so they thought. Sherill, a mother who had spent years working hard to provide for Suzie, had finally found a sense of peace. She was content, even after her marriage had fallen apart. Her daughter was the light of her life, and now that she was officially an adult, the feeling of worry about the world outside was becoming a constant in her life. But this night would be the last time anyone saw them. Hours passed, and a simple goodnight text sent by Suzie was the last message to be received at 11:51 p.m. The next morning, June 7th, when Sherill's best friend tried reaching her, there was no answer. By then, everything seemed just off enough for the neighbor to take a second glance. The absence of any indication of forced entry or violence left behind eerie traces. A wet towel on the bathroom floor, Suzie's purse untouched and open, Stacy's car keys on the counter. The family dog, typically a nuisance at the door, was found pacing nervously, refusing to come to anyone. The fear set in. But it wasn't until Suzie's car was seen outside and the phone calls went unanswered that the unease turned to alarm. As friends gathered at the house, the feeling in the air was thick, suffocating. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A missing persons report was filed, and the Springfield Police Department was soon involved. They combed through the house, the street, and surrounding neighborhoods, but found nothing. It was as though they had disappeared into thin air. When the police first arrived, the investigation felt like it was unfolding in slow motion. There were no visible signs of a struggle, but the women's absence was entirely unlike any case the department had handled before. Sherill, Suzie, and Stacy were not only beloved in their community, they were well known. This wasn't a case of someone fleeing or an isolated incident. There was a growing sense that they had been taken. The search expanded, becoming a massive effort that involved local volunteers, search dogs, helicopters, and FBI agents. There was a timeline that investigators could piece together from friends and family. Suzie and Stacy had been at a graduation party late into the night, and after they left, they returned to the home they shared with Sherill. But from there, the clues were sparse. Yet something didn't sit right. The house was locked from the inside, but there were no signs of struggle. Sherill's phone, which had been found on the couch, was also still operational, adding another layer of confusion. Why would the women leave their phones behind if they were leaving? The same questions arose repeatedly, without answers. Every lead felt like it came from a different direction. One moment, they were investigating a potential abduction. The next, they were following reports of a strange man seen near the house. But each tip led nowhere. In the first few days, there were hopeful moments. A reported sighting of a woman matching Suzie's description, or a tip-off from someone claiming to have overheard something about the women's whereabouts. But each time, the trail went cold. No surveillance footage, no witnesses, nothing but shadows. It wasn't just the lack of evidence that made this case chilling, but the silence. No ransom calls, no demand for money, no trace of physical violence. It made the disappearance even more baffling. The more they looked, the more it seemed like the three women had vanished into thin air. Their personal belongings were in place, their cars left untouched. No one had seen them leave the house. No one had heard a thing. The search for the women had already started to take a toll on the investigators. There were moments of frustration, not just because of a lack of clues, but because of the nature of the disappearance. The scene in that house felt wrong. Someone knew something. Someone was hiding something. Weeks turned into months, and still no answers. Yet the theories about what happened to the women only grew more numerous and more disturbing. The theory that stuck most prominently in the public's mind was the possibility that the women had been taken by someone they knew. This theory arose after the police began focusing on Sherill's ex-husband, a man with a violent past. He was questioned, but no physical evidence connected him to the crime. The idea that someone close to the victims could have been involved left many feeling unsettled. Was it possible that one of them had been betrayed by someone they trusted? Then there were the whispers about a serial killer. Springfield had been plagued with unsolved crimes in the years leading up to the disappearances. Could this be another victim of a predator who had taken advantage of the unsuspecting? Some in the media even suggested the possibility that the three women had been murdered, their bodies hidden away, victims of a far more grisly fate. And then there was the haunting idea that the women had somehow left voluntarily. Perhaps they had become overwhelmed by life, by the pressure of high school graduation, of growing up, and had run away together to escape. But this didn't explain the abandonment of their cars, their phones, their belongings. No one could fathom them simply walking away from everything, from their families, their friends. They had been so close to starting a new chapter in their lives. Even as the public's theories grew wilder, the evidence still refused to cooperate. Each lead was more promising than the last, only to collapse like a house of cards. Investigators were stuck in a loop. The frustration grew, especially with each passing year. But still, there was no closure, no explanation. As the case dragged on, time became an enemy. The longer the search continued, the more people began to doubt the chances of ever finding out what had happened. The media coverage began to fade. The case of the Springfield Three no longer dominated the evening news or the local paper's front page. But for the families of Sherill, Suzie, and Stacy, hope was a delicate thing. They kept it alive, though it was becoming harder. Every year, they held a small vigil on the anniversary of their disappearance, but the empty seats at the table grew more difficult to bear. Stacy McCall's mother, Judy, never stopped looking. She dedicated herself to keeping her daughter's memory alive, even if it meant reliving the pain each year. But even Judy couldn't stop the creeping doubt that she would never get the answers she so desperately needed. And then there was Cheryl's mother, who still waited for her daughter to come home, despite everything. Every year, she would go through Cheryl's old things, holding on to the belief that one day she would walk through the door and ask why she'd been gone so long. In their hearts, they still had hope. But it was becoming more fragile, more faint with every year that passed. Over time, the case of the Springfield Three became a dark chapter in the history of Springfield, Missouri. A haunting reminder of what could happen when someone simply vanished. But for those who were still left behind, the pain never dulled. The questions that remained unanswered were always there, in the back of their minds. The legacy of the case of Sherill, Suzie, and Stacy became more than just a headline. It was a legacy of grief that had transformed the lives of everyone involved. The families of the missing women continued to hold onto the hope of finding out what happened, but the years had changed them. The hope was still there, but it had become tinged with a sad acceptance that maybe they would never know the full story. But the community still remembers. The case might have faded from the headlines, but the questions remained. Every June, when the anniversary of their disappearance came around, people whispered their names. The Springfield Three became a symbol, a reminder of how quickly someone could disappear and how hard it was to know the truth. On the morning of June 7, 1992, when friends and family discovered the unsettling scene at 1717 East Delmar Street, the Springfield Police Department was immediately alerted. Officers arrived to find the house in order, with no signs of forced entry, but clear indications that the women had vanished without a trace. The presence of personal belongings, including purses, wallets, and vehicles, heightened the sense of urgency. In the days following the disappearance, investigators explored various leads. One early theory suggested that the women had left voluntarily, perhaps to escape personal issues. However, this was quickly dismissed due to the circumstances surrounding their disappearance. The fact that all personal belongings were left behind, including a substantial amount of cash in Sherill Levitt's purse, indicated that they had not planned to leave. Another theory involved the possibility of a serial abductor operating in the area. The proximity of the Wilsons Creek National Battlefield, where Civil War reenactments were held, led to speculation about the involvement of individuals attending these events. This theory gained traction with the emergence of Larry Hall as a person of interest. Larry Hall, a convicted serial killer with a history of abductions and murders, became a focal point in the investigation. His presence in the Midwest during the time of the disappearances and his known history of targeting young women raised suspicions. However, despite extensive interviews and investigations, no concrete evidence linked Hall to the Springfield Three case. In 1997, Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper and robber, claimed to have knowledge about the fate of the Springfield Three. He alleged that the women had been murdered and their bodies would never be found. Cox's statements were met with skepticism by investigators, as he had a history of making false claims to gain attention. His involvement in the case remains unsubstantiated. The case garnered significant media attention, with national outlets covering the story extensively. Programs like America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries featured segments on the Springfield Three, bringing the case into the public eye and generating numerous tips. Despite the influx of information, none of the leads resulted in breakthroughs. Over the years, various theories have emerged regarding the disappearance of the Springfield Three. While none have been conclusively proven, they reflect the complexity and enduring mystery of the case. One prevailing theory is that the women were abducted by someone they knew. The lack of signs of forced entry and the fact that personal belongings were left behind suggest that they may have been taken by someone they trusted. This theory points to the possibility of an acquaintance or family member being involved. Another theory posits that the women were victims of a serial killer operating in the area. The proximity of the Wilsons Creek National Battlefield and the timing of Civil War reenactments led to speculation about individuals attending these events. The involvement of Larry Hall, a convicted serial killer, in the Midwest during the time of the disappearances fueled this theory. Some have suggested that the women left voluntarily, possibly to escape personal issues. However, This theory is considered less likely due to the circumstances of their disappearance, including the abandonment of personal belongings and the lack of preparation for such an event. In 2007, a tipster claimed that the women's bodies were buried in the foundations of the south parking garage at Cox Hospital. Ground-penetrating radar scans revealed anomalies consistent with grave sites. However, the hospital's construction began over a year after the disappearances, leading investigators to dismiss the theory as unsubstantiated. Despite the passage of time, the search for the Springfield Three continues. The Springfield Police Department maintains an active investigation, and the case remains open. The families of Suzie, Sherill, and Stacy have not given up hope and continue to seek answers. In recent years, there have been renewed efforts to solve the case. Advances in forensic technology and the re-examination of old evidence have provided new avenues for investigation. Additionally, public interest in the case has led to increased awareness and the possibility of new leads. The community in Springfield has remained supportive, with local organizations and volunteers assisting in the search efforts. Vigilance and awareness campaigns continue to keep the case in the public's mind, encouraging anyone with information to come forward. The disappearance of Suzie, Sherill, and Stacy has taken a profound emotional toll on their families and friends. The uncertainty and lack of closure have left lasting scars. Suzie's mother, Janice McCall, has expressed the pain of not knowing what happened to her daughter. She continues to advocate for the case, hoping that one day the truth will emerge. Similarly, Cheryl's family remains committed to finding answers, holding on to the hope that their loved one will be found. The community of Springfield has also been affected by the case. The disappearance of 3 individuals from a close-knit town has left a void. Memorials and tributes have been held over the years, reflecting the collective grief and desire for resolution. While the Springfield Three case remains unsolved, it has led to positive changes in how missing persons cases are handled. The case has highlighted the need for improved protocols in missing persons investigations. Law enforcement agencies have adopted new technologies and strategies to handle such cases more effectively. The widespread media coverage of the case has raised public awareness about missing persons issues. Organizations dedicated to helping families of missing individuals have gained support, leading to increased resources and assistance for those affected. As of 2025, the Springfield Three remain missing. The investigation continues, and the families hold on to hope. The case serves as a reminder of the importance of community, the resilience of families, and the enduring quest for justice.